Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Keith Bryan. I'm one of the senior sales leaders for Amazon Web Services based out of the Dallas, Texas office. I'm happy to introduce the story of Magellan Strategic Cloud Initiatives and their journey to the cloud. We have two representatives from Magellan, which is a division of OneOak today, their CIO Bhupesh, and Stan, who is going to talk about how they did the data architecture. But I want to spend a couple of minutes kind of beginning with their journey. What you're going to learn about today is how do they begin leveraging the benefits of the AWS cloud, in particular around innovation and agility. We'll talk more about that. We're going to talk a little bit about their actual cloud transformation. Like, they were not in the cloud. They were dabbling in cloud, curious about the cloud, trying to find the benefits around it, and collaborating with the AWS team and our industry experts. It's a really interesting story to talk about. Bhupesh is going to talk about why they chose AWS after a couple of different choices, and we'll take a look at one of Magellan's key data pipelines that's going out there, and we'll take some Q&A at the end of the day. So going back almost 14, 16 months now, when we began this conversation with Magellan, there were really 6 key things that Magellan wanted to consider in the choice to move to the cloud. You know, certainly I'll start on the far right-hand side. Agility and innovation were really sort of top of mind. They realized, and they knew in their gut, there was really some value in their data. They realized for their line of business partners, we could be doing so many more things together and solve some real operational problems, driving top and bottom line efficiencies. So they believed that cloud in general would drive agility and innovation. At the same time, as you know, in the cloud, scaling up and scaling down, adjusting not only capacity but costs, is a real incentive to move to the cloud. Also, as they began to expand around, having the cloud just about anywhere possible is a big deal. And of course, cost came into mind, but most importantly for being in the business or in the midstream space, oil and gas space, security is absolutely paramount. So as they began their journey of trying to figure out which is the right cloud provider, these 6 things were really pervasive. One of the bigger aspects that they were constantly considering is, hey, how do I move our organization from being a, hey, put your request in, we'll drive some budget, we'll carve out some project time, we'll try and execute on the ideas. How do I take this idea of being a full-service way of doing things to a completely different and radical way of having a self-service approach, enabling, equipping, helping the lines of business innovate, bring ideas to market much, much quicker. Yeah, as we began kind of talking about this, it was kind of fun to see that the cost of innovation at Magellan dropped dramatically. The cost of moving to the cloud, the cost to initiate that one idea, get it up and running, try something inside of a day instead of months, quarters, perhaps years, was really important for Magellan's decisions. Moving from a full service to a self-service approach was a big, big deal. So with regard to the agility pace of innovation, one thing that allowed them to do is they knew that, you know, in the midstream space with almost 9,900 miles of pipeline to move petrochemicals around to have supply meet demand in certain markets and blending and mixing these petrochemicals across a very large pipeline, you know, it creates a lot of operational challenges. There's a lot of things that could be better. There's a lot of ways to drive innovation and top and bottom line efficiencies. So the ability to be agile and accelerate the pace of innovation was a really big deal. Now, I know that my team came alongside with a lot of our solutions architects, our industry experts, and we began sharing early on the selection process case studies of where we solved similar problems for other energy companies, where we've used the power of data in our data lakes, in our generative AI and AI ML technologies to help these companies bring these ideas to market. And I remember one anecdotal story. They were probably maybe 4 or 5 months in. A good chunk of the Magellan team had begun taking some of the core basic architectural classes in AWS. And I was chatting with one of our sponsors there, and he had just given a briefing to their CEO and to their board. And he said, Keith, I have really interesting news. I go, what is it? He goes, I got 2 questions. First question was, how are you able to do this so fast? And the second question was, can we go faster? And so what one of the guys had done with just kind of the entry-level stuff is they knew their business really, really well. They knew the challenges that they had. But now they had this different tool set, this different approach. This cost of curiosity dropped quite a bit. They were able to execute a couple of ideas in a matter of days and weeks versus months and quarters. In the lines of business, the C-suite, the executive really began to lean in and notice. And I want to just compliment their CIO, who I'll invite to the stage. Bhupesh was a visionary driving this choice. He knew in his gut that the choice for moving to the cloud was going to overall equip and enable Magellan's business. So it's a great pleasure to introduce Bhupesh to the stage.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a small audience, so firstly, thank you for being here during your lunch hour. I know you got a lot of choices here, and also you have the lunch hour on you. So thank you for being here. We won't take the entire 1 hour, and it's a small size, audience here. So you have time for questions, and we'll finish that. We'll have a lot of time for questions. So a little bit about, thank you, Keith. So a little bit about Magellan Midstream Partners. Firstly, we are One Oak. We're One Oak company since end of September. So what does Magellan Midstream do? We are based in Tulsa. We are an oil and gas pipeline company. We ship, transport, store, distribute liquid fuels, which is refined fuels, as well as crude oil. And we pretty much own Midwest and South, right? So we got 10,000 miles of refined fuels and 2,000 miles of crude, as well as around 37 million barrels of storage, marine facilities. So we are critical infrastructure of the nation. $3 billion revenues. We were a spin-off from Williams Companies, which is also based in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and we grew pretty fast. So a little bit, that's the history. We now, as I said, part of One Oak, and really, the acquisition, the merging with One Oak was a diversification strategy. One Oak is a natural gas pipeline-based business, $20 billion plus. So we're now a $23 billion plus company. It's a huge company now. Big market cap, probably around $60 billion in the market. Let's see. So that gives you a history of the company. I'll step into why. Why did we go into cloud? A lot of companies want to go to cloud. I've been in cloud before, so I worked at AV Denison, so I went to Google Cloud in 2013 because of Google Email. So I've been in multiple cloud environments, and frankly, for Magellan, AWS was the choice, and they advanced so much, was really a no-brainer for us. So before we go into why we need to talk about why we went into cloud, and maybe that's interesting for some of you. So it started in 2020, I joined in 2020, it was all about prioritizing digital or technology for the company. If you think about 2020, COVID times, energy transition, call it transformation or transition is going on in the world, growth is slowing down, and companies such as us are looking for ways to reduce cost or increase revenues, top line, bottom line. And you're forced to look at many areas, such as technology as being one of them. And that's what we did. There was a hunger to look at opportunities and technology, even without prioritizing digital coming in, there were a lot of opportunities for technology. Now, you can do a digital journey and say, yes, let's go to one department, one business domain, let's go to operations and pull people together and create that roadmap. You can do that, and you can do it one domain, business domain by business domain, but that's suboptimal, right? It's suboptimal because you're not able to connect the dots across the functions, and prioritizing ideas and resources across the business domains becomes extremely challenging. So what we did was we pulled people together, right, which is across all departments, 60 leaders across the company for 3 months to create a digital journey for us. Now that is good, but how do you do that, right? When a company is not as up to speed with technology, the latest technology. So we started with what we call the digital fluency. That was the biggest focus. We spent 4 weeks, not 1 week, not 2 weeks, 4 weeks educating our 60 leaders on technology. What's the latest? What can AI do? What can data do? What does API mean? And so that they can now understand technology and can put the pain points in the business and connect the dots. So that was the first focus area, digital fluency. for 4 weeks. And then we went into creating a digital strategy and roadmap where we put people or the leaders across our company, all departments, from the CEO top down to multiple levels, on almost an 8-week type of workshops where we got people together, brainstormed ideas across all functions, except finance. We didn't do finance, we didn't do legal, we didn't do finance and legal were the 2 areas we didn't do. We didn't think that was as much as a priority at that point. And we came up with a roadmap. Interestingly, we came up with, that point, 130 ideas within 2 months. Now, a lot of these ideas existed. They were just sitting there dormant. So a lot of them was just documenting and making sure people resonate with the ideas and putting a value case to it, a high-level value case. And that's what we did in the digital strategy and roadmap. We put a NPV, we put a value. That was the end of the roadmap. And now what next? Now we got to go and execute on these ideas. And how are we going to do it? So that being the case, so what we did is we started creating an innovation team, starting teaching agile methodologies to the company. We trained more than 100 people across the company, design thinking, as well as the ability to, as well as recruit talent so we can start executing on those ideas. And that's what we've been doing since 2021. Now, would you say those 130 ideas, the same ideas we executed on? Absolutely not, right? Because what we really did was we shifted mindsets. We opened the idea of how technology can innovate for you, and more ideas started coming in. So a lot of those ideas are still sitting on the shelf because newer ideas have replaced those original ideas. So that's the beauty of what I call shifting mindsets and making your enterprise more of an agile enterprise, an innovative enterprise. So what are the areas we focused on? These are the 4 areas. One is customer experience. And customer experience was about the ideas we came up with is how can we connect with the customers better? Whether it's Quick Trip or other customers we have, how can we connect with them better? For example, with APIs. How can we integrate with their systems? The other thought in customer experience was how can we make it easier to do business? Are there things that we have data on and we have not really surfaced onto our portal? So there are multiple ideas around that we actually enable a customer portal, things that they were calling in, now they could do it digitally. And lastly, if we put new services in, will they pay for it? And we actually were able to create new services or new transactions that had digital access where they're paying us for it from a subscription basis. So customer experience was a big component, and we've had a ton of value created already in the last 2 years or so. Operational efficiency is about, we've got, as I said, a huge set of assets, pipelines. Making sure a product is moving across those pipelines efficiently is key, and that comes a lot with technology. We have a lot of data across the pipelines. We know where the product is, so how can we move the product more efficiently from point A to point B? The second is we have trucks that come into terminals where they load up all the products, the refined fuels, and can we deliver it a little bit more intelligently? What is the request coming in? The driver, what is the steps for the driver to come in to get to the loading dock, and removing those steps, making their access easier, and information where they have to punch in, not able to punch it anymore, but have it available based on the carrier that's coming in to load it. And lastly, it's about a pipeline. You have a huge pipeline or set of assets, making sure the life of those assets are maintained, as well as what we call integrity management. We're able to predict the maintenance better. Mic's still on. Employee experience. So that's all about the life cycle. You as an employee coming into the company, from the interview process to onboarding, to actually managing you when you're in the company in terms of talent management. The other one will be performance management, ease of access to information, to sign up on different information services, making that easy. The life cycle of the employee, we put in a lot of digital tools in our portfolio. And data, which Stan is going to talk about, we wanted to break the barriers. We didn't really know what the value was. We thought there was value, but we knew data was in islands, was in silos. And the thought was to bring the data into one place across these silos so we can give a more of a connected access, more of a joined access across applications so we can get more actionable insights. And we've been doing a lot, building a data foundation since last year and a half. I can't really talk about the use case as much, but it's a lot of AI-driven use case that really helps us improve our bottom line. So 4 areas, a lot of ideas, but all that only happens, which is the surrounding blocks. We talk about innovation, learning, culture. So when we have all these ideas, it's important to understand what the culture is. If you don't understand the culture, you're not going to make progress with the digital journey. So knowing the pace, having the partnership, having I would say the consensus from your management and working with them is key to success. Those 4, without knowing and connecting with the culture, everything will not go fast as you want it to be. So that's our focus. Those are some of the ideas we had. We have a team that's executing on all of them, as I mentioned, and we made some great progress, creating approximately $40 million plus value of that. So what are the technology platforms? And kind of leads into why we chose AWS. When we looked at all the initiatives, there was a common thread. We needed API so we can connect internally and externally to our customers. AI/ML, so we have a lot of data. We have a lot of data on our pipelines, 10,000 miles. And we have a lot of customer data. To make use of the data and create the data foundation so we can create new insights into it is a big component of it. We talk about data foundation, but taking it to the next level on how we can get analytics to our users is a common theme. And finally, workflow automation. We had a lot of manual processes in our operations. Automating that through workflows, utilizing technologies that will help us get to the answer, low-code, no-code type of scenarios was a common theme. And that's, when you look at all those opportunities, you don't want to buy multiple solutions. And that's why we started looking at the cloud. And we didn't just look at AWS. We looked at Google. We looked at Microsoft. In the end, we selected AWS. It was really a default choice. It was a no-brainer almost when we looked at what we needed in a one-stop shop, just not for today, but more ideas coming in for years and years in the future. So why AWS? The first one is we wanted to partner with someone, a provider, that had direct experience with midstream. Midstream is very unique. I will say not a lot of knowledge, not a lot of solutions out there, very niche solutions, and it's hard to find a provider that really understands the industry. So you find a lot of providers in upstream, you find a lot of providers in downstream, but not so many in midstream. And interestingly, AWS has a lot of experience in that, and they brought some use cases which really opened up our eyes. A broader set of native data technologies, you heard all about that in the morning session, and we probably about 2 years back, we were just floored with what they had even at that time, and now it's only gotten better. The breadth of the offerings, we talked about all the technologies we in the previous slides, I won't go into that. I think the incentives, and there's a component of executive support. We had a huge journey. We were investing millions of dollars, and we wanted a partner that's invested in terms of resources and can go along versus a tactical partner that does one initiative and then moves on to the next customer. And AWS provided that, they promised us that, and that's been holding true to date. And I guess one more I will touch on is a more mature management practice. Adam talked about that this morning, which is the working backwards. That's core to AWS, which is looking at how do we think about the solution? What is really the pain point? What is really the problem? Versus thinking, just jumping to a solution, right? And the working backwards gets us to that. We've done multiple working backwards sessions and various pain points where Amazon has come in, done workshops, so we can get to what's the root cause, what's the pain point, what are we really driving at, and then we can come up with a better business case and even more ideas. So that mature management practice, as we call it, really clicks with us. It really resonates with our innovative culture that we want to drive, and that's what Amazon also represents. And we've gotten a lot of benefits out of that. So I think this somewhat, I won't go into the others, but it essentially gives you a pretty good picture on, we didn't really get into the cloud for the sake of getting into the cloud. There had to be a good rationale. There had to be a good business case. And it started with what value can technology bring to the company? And the answer to the cloud came later after going through that business case, going through those ideas, and seeing the match with the cloud. And finally, going to a place which is a one-stop shop versus buying 20 solutions to solve the 20 ideas or problems we had. So we've been pretty happy. And our journey is not complete, as I said. We at least got 3 to 5 years more of interesting ideas. And now we're part of OneOak, so we'll see what more ideas come with OneOak merger, essentially. So we talked about the strategic aspect. I also want to make sure the audience here is a mix, probably. We also have a deep dive into a technical solution we use in a data pipeline. This is very unique and very interesting that may appeal to some of the folks in the audience. So I'm going to bring up Stanley Tan, who is our key data engineer leader for us, and he's going to talk about one of our data pipeline technologies.
Thank you, Bhupesh. Good afternoon. My name is Stan Tan. Before I begin my presentation, I would like to ask one question. For a quick show of hands, how many of you here would consider yourself have a technical background? Okay, thank you. Well, this really helps me to know how I'm going to present my 1 hour long presentation. I'm just kidding, it's not gonna be an hour long, it's gonna be 15 minutes or less. So let's go ahead and get started. So, you just heard Bhupesh discuss about our digital transformation journey to AWS that began last year. We were working on an advanced data analytics projects in AWS environments that requires data from our on-prem data stores. One of the key challenges we had was the projects needed operational technology data from our on-prem historian, which is in a secure network that has no access to and from the internet. Discovering and accessing this data were highly challenging. Business users and data scientists were only able to access them through a vendor software or a vendor-provided Excel plugin. So, due to this limitation, they were having challenges and limited capabilities to analyze the data efficiently in order to make better business decisions. Data engineers has to figure out a solution to transfer this data to AWS to meet the project needs and to make it easily accessible. A data pipeline needs to meet 3 requirements. First, which is the most important one, transferring operational technology data securely to AWS. We had to figure out a solution to push the data out of the secure network into AWS instead of a tool or a service reaching in to pull the data. Second, data availability needs to be at near real time for analysis. And third, a data pipeline needs to check and backfill if there are gaps in the data due to issues such as network or infrastructure outages that cause data loss. The great thing about AWS from a technical standpoint is they offer hundreds of services that are available at your fingertips. However, the downside is, for a newcomer, this can be overwhelming and confusing. We had multiple working sessions and discussion with AWS solutions architect when we were planning on building the pipeline. And we narrowed it down to 4 main services. First is AWS IoT Core. It allows us to transfer data using Message Queue Telemetry Transport Protocol, or MQTT, securely. Second, AWS Glue, a serverless data integration tool. Third, Amazon Time Stream, a fast, scalable, and serverless time series database. And fourth, Amazon Kinesis Data Firehose, a fully managed service for delivering streaming data to destinations such as S3, Redshift, just to name a few. Now I'm going to show you and walk you through a high-level architecture diagram of the data pipeline that we've built using these services. On the left shows on-premise servers in our secure network. The historian has an OPC Unified Architecture, or OPC UA service built in. OPC UA is a data exchange standard used in industrial automation and communication. Each data point in the historian has a memory address space to be discovered and utilized by OPC client. We added a client and connects it to AWS IoT Core using a certificate over a secure TLS connection. It monitors the data points and publishes when value change to IoT Core using MQTT protocol over the secure connection. This meets the first requirement, transferring operational technology data securely to AWS. IoT Core's rule engines enables continuous processing of inbound data using SQL-like syntax to automatically transform and filter them. It also has configurable rules to route data to several AWS and third-party services. Instead of writing the data directly into Amazon TimeStream, we created a rule to invoke a Lambda function to perform data transformation and enrichment and then write it into the database. And this meets the second requirement, providing data and data availability at near real time for analysis. For the third requirement, backfilling gaps in the data. We knew we needed to implement a batch data pipeline that runs on a nightly basis. But the question was, how do we find the gaps in the data? Well, one way is you could query the data from Amazon TimeStream and compare it with the batch data and determine where the gaps are. But querying the database would incur additional costs for no purpose of data analysis. So we asked AWS Solutions Architect of a cost-effective solution to this problem. They proposed Amazon Kinesis Data Firehose to capture inbound streaming data from IoT Core and transfer them to an S3 bucket. Here is the implementation of the batch data pipeline. We purchased a data integration tool, created a workflow to extract data from the historian using a REST API and transfer them to an S3 bucket over a secure HTTPS S3 endpoint. A few years ago, we did a Hadoop proof of concept and created a job using Apache Spark to do data transformation and data cleansing on the same data set. Apache Spark is an open source data analytics engine for large-scale data processing. It is also one of the data integration engines in AWS Glue. So we basically ported the code over to AWS Glue, added additional codes to find gaps in the data, and transformed them to the correct format for the second Glue jobs to backfill the gaps in Amazon TimeStream. So that is the high-level architecture diagram of the data pipeline that we've built using these services, both streaming and batch, together with third-party tools. Now you might be wondering, why did we choose these services? IoT Cores provides an end-to-end encryption to securely transfer data to AWS, and it simplifies device connections that use MQTT protocol. IoT Core's rule engines provides a SQL-like syntax to automatically transform and filter inbound data and integrations with other AWS services. AWS Glue provides a serverless platform for data engineers that we do not need to manage the underlying infrastructure. We can focus on writing codes and building data pipeline. Because it is Spark-based and we already have the skill set, we can begin building data pipeline on the platform with no learning curve. It is cost efficient because we only pay for resources when data pipelines are running. Amazon TimeStream provides an always-on data encryptions and a serverless platform. Built-in time series analysis functions helps accelerate data scientists to derive deeper insights from time series data. We can choose to configure data retention policy and choose to store data in an in-memory or magnetic store to control storage costs. Amazon Kinesis Data Firehose is easy to set up for loading streaming data to data stores, configurable dynamic partitioning, and built-in data transformation. Here are some of the key takeaways from this presentation. We were able to experiment and do proof of concept with low cost of failure with the services that AWS offers. Without IoT Core, it might take us weeks or longer to implement a streaming data pipeline that transfer operational technology data from our on-prem historians to AWS. It simplifies the connectivities between devices and AWS cloud. We specifically chose serverless services to allow data engineers to focus on data pipeline development and not have to manage the underlying infrastructure. Serverless technologies features automatic scaling, built-in high availability, and pay-for-use pricing model to increase agility and to optimize costs. We have access to AWS Solutions Architect for advice, best practice, and inputs. Thank you, AWS, for helping us throughout this whole journey to the cloud. I don't think we're able to do this without you guys, so thank you very much. Here are some additional resources of the services that I've mentioned in my presentation. And before I end my presentation, there are two things that I would like you to consider when you leave this breakout session. First is, when you get back to your office, think about the services that you've learned in this presentation or the services that you've learned at reInvent on how you can apply them in your current projects or future projects. And second, I strongly encourage you to reach out to your AWS Technical Account Manager or AWS Solutions Architect when you have any questions. They are there to help you to be successful in your journey to AWS. So thank you very much, and I hope you enjoy this presentation and have a great conference.